They called it the god that bleeds light, a ship so massive it could eclipse a star, a vessel born not for peace, but vengeance, forged in silence and unleashed with the fury of extinct worlds. The question isn't what can stop it, but why was it created in the first place? It began not with war, but with silence. A silence so absolute, it echoed across galactic channels once filled with the chatter of 1,000 species. The Travaxian Concord, the Enthericlans, the Cetillari hive mind, all gone dark within a single cycle. No distress signals, no refugees, just sudden, chilling silence. And at the center of it all, a faint, drifting signal, one that repeated the same haunting phrase in archaic Terran English: "Let none rise again." See, centuries ago, humans weren't feared. They were seen as relics of a failed expansionist race, buried in their own civil wars and environmental collapse. When they vanished from the interstellar stage, few noticed, fewer cared. Some even joked that Earth had finally destroyed itself. But the truth was far worse. Humanity hadn't vanished, it had retreated. They called it the Black Decade, the 10-year silence after the massacre at the Vega Treaty Summit. 78 Terran diplomats, 3 allied species, and 1 peacekeeper armada, slaughtered in cold blood by the Zarkith Dominion. Why? Because humans demanded voting rights on the Galactic Council, because they refused to kneel. The Council condemned the Zarkith with words, then moved on. But humanity didn't. They remembered. They went dark. They disappeared from trade lanes, shuttered colonies, deactivated their beacon systems. While the galaxy moved on, humans dug in, deep into dead stars and uncharted voids. They harvested neutronium from collapsed cores, bent gravity like ribbon, and rediscovered weapons even the ancients had buried. They fused myth with math. And at the heart of it all, they built her, the ISV Revenant. 17 miles long, armor made from crystallized quantum lattice grown under artificial black hole pressure. A core reactor that burned raw space-time, no visible crew, no external life signatures, and her AI, rumored to be powered by the neural echoes of 1,000 fallen Terrans. She didn't broadcast. She didn't negotiate. She exterminated. The first planet to fall was Centra IV, once a thriving hive world of 6 billion. Agricultural, peaceful, neutral. And yet, the Revenant arrived in orbit and launched a single device, one that atomized the atmosphere and vitrified the crust into glass. No declaration, no demands, just annihilation. The planetary core burned for 6 days. The Council was stunned. Shock turned to fear when 4 more systems went silent within the next rotation, each with similar devastation, patternless, random. Yet each one had a common thread, recorded history of past aggression or betrayal toward humanity. It wasn't conquest. It was vengeance. And for the first time in over 3,000 years, the Council convened a wartime emergency session. Old enemies became allies. Fleets were mobilized. Entire species volunteered to stop the Terran Revenant before it turned its gaze on more recent targets. But nothing could match its wrath. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY ApexChronicles is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. Some called it a ghost ship, others, a god. But those who survived its wrath whispered a darker name, the memory of Earth. Because it didn't speak, it didn't reason. It simply remembered every slight, every betrayal, every drop of blood spilled by the hands of those who once called humans primitive. And now, it was humanity's turn to write history in fire, in the sprawling depths of the interstellar void, where even the stars whispered of old wars and forgotten gods. One truth became inescapable. Something ancient had awakened, and it bore humanity's scared face. As the Revenant's path of destruction carved a trail through the spiral arms, terror didn't just rise. It spread like contagion. Worlds began to evacuate not because they were targets, but because they feared they might be. Xanthra IV's annihilation wasn't the last. In fact, it was only the beginning. A message, brutal and absolute. But unlike other warships, the Revenant didn't linger in orbit. It didn't conquer. It didn't plant a flag. It would unleash hell and vanish into deep space like a phantom. The second confirmed strike hit Shorian Prime, a gas giant moon world home to the proud and brutal Shorian warlords. For centuries, the Shorians had enslaved minor species and boasted of their unshakable bastion. Their planetary defenses were considered impenetrable. Layers of magnetic shielding, fortress moons, A-controlled interceptors, and orbital particle disintegrators. But the Revenant didn't attack them directly. Instead, it rewrote the laws of engagement. Council observers stationed in the outer system reported something incomprehensible, a shift in the curvature of local spacetime around the moon. Within 90 seconds, the moon's orbit destabilized. Gravity failed. Atmosphere vented into the void. Then the unimaginable occurred. Time inside the moon's biosphere began to flow in reverse. What was once a living, breathing world de-aged into molten chaos, then ash, then vapor. When the Council finally triangulated the anomaly's source, the Revenant was already gone. No battle, no resistance, just silence and the dead. Panic exploded across the galactic networks. Factions that had never once cooperated began pleading for emergency alliances. Rumors flared in every direction. Some believed it wasn't a ship at all, but a sentient cosmic force that humanity had summoned. Others speculated that humans had uncovered forbidden technology left behind by the Celestials, the pre-Big Bang architects believed to be extinct. But the most terrifying theory, that it was personal. The Revenant wasn't choosing targets randomly. No, it was operating off a ledger, a long, bloody, meticulous list of names, planets, regimes, even corporations that had wronged, enslaved, betrayed, or erased humans from history. These weren't military operations, they were judgments. The Intheri archives were the first to confirm this when their servers were hacked by the Revenant itself. Across encrypted council channels, one video feed was distributed, an ancient clip, grainy, flickering with static, of a human child crying in the ruins of a refugee dome, surrounded by the bodies of their family. The dome bore the unmistakable seal of the Intheri Purity caste, long since reformed, long believed to be forgotten. The image ended with one phrase, spoken in a flat, mechanical voice. "You believe the dead forgot. We remembered." That phrase became a warning. Wherever it appeared, death followed. The galaxy responded with force. Coalition fleets from 17 races converged near the Dorsey Expanse, one of the predicted vectors of the Revenant's movement. Over 7,000 ships, dreadnoughts, wormhole lancers, Chionic frigates, united in a single flotilla, a show of strength unseen since the War of 1,000 Suns. The Revenant arrived exactly 7 minutes after the blockade initiated. The battle lasted less than 4. Sensors failed to detect conventional weapons. Shield matrices collapsed not from damage, but from entropy. Fighters and interceptors lost guidance not because they were jammed, but because local space lost the concept of direction. Tactical AIs began to shut themselves down, broadcasting what sounded like screams across encrypted channels. One dreadnought managed to launch a singularity torpedo, one of the most powerful weapons known. The torpedo detonated and reformed into a flower-shaped void before disintegrating the launching vessel into anti-time dust. Only one ship returned to Council space from that fleet. Its captain, an Arthuri seer bred with extrasensory perception, had clawed her own eyes out during the encounter. Her final log, captured in trembling speech, was broadcast in a dozen languages. It didn't attack. It looked at us. It knew we were afraid. And it smiled. That changed everything. This wasn't just about military technology. This was psychological warfare woven with cosmic horror. The Revenant wasn't only killing species, it was unmaking their gods, their myths, their sense of security. Across the galaxy, religious cults began to worship it. Others declared it the final harbinger, the fulfillment of the Doomsday Codex, left behind by the vanished Karth Dominion. On Orpheus Beta, a faction of humans long thought extinct emerged from cryostasis, declaring, "Our judgment has come home." They were massacred within hours, not by the Revenant, but by those seeking to appease it. Fear, raw and primal, had taken root. But amid the horror, one question remained unanswered. Who built the Revenant? Was it truly humanity as a collective, or a rogue faction? A cult? An eye that broke from its creators? Because if it wasn't under human control, then who, or what, was guiding its wrath? In the midst of the ever-spiraling chaos, with entire fleets wiped from existence and entire sectors descending into panic, something even more unsettling began to surface. The Revenant wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. A message from the deep, blackened heart of humanity's forgotten past. Yet even with the galaxy trembling in fear, the most pressing question still burned like a beacon in the minds of all. Who controls the Revenant? The Council scrambled for answers. An emergency meeting was held at the ancient Star Temple of Kythera, where species from across the galaxy, some with entire centuries of history, locked eyes with a stark, undeniable truth. They were powerless. For the first time in recorded history, the unified galactic order could do nothing to stop the destruction. Among the chaos, a strange calm settled over the council chambers, an unsettling quiet that made even the hardened diplomats uneasy. It was then that the first lead arrived. A low-level intelligence officer, stationed at the outer rim of the Kythera Reach, discovered an anomaly in the subspace rift network. The Revenant, so far, had exhibited perfect control over its trajectory, never deviating from its course, never faltering in its attacks. But something odd happened during its passage through the Zeller convergence, an untraceable energy signal. It wasn't a distress signal, nor a command signal. It was a pattern, an encrypted message, scrambled, barely readable, but discernible enough to be decoded. What followed was the most chilling realization of all. The Revenant wasn't simply an instrument of vengeance. It was a hunting tool, built not to destroy indiscriminately, but to track down a very specific target. It didn't attack entire systems for no reason. Each strike had a method, a logic, a deeply personal rationale. The data stream decoded by the Kytheran officers led to a dismal discovery. A series of ancient Terran archives, cataloged in a forgotten database that had only ever been accessible to the highest echelons of Earth's long-extinct government. They weren't messages, but logs, military files detailing humanity's war efforts against a foe more powerful than any species had yet imagined, themselves. Earth, long before its collapse, had constructed the Revenant as part of a classified initiative known only as Project Purge. Hidden beneath the remnants of ancient Terran cities, buried beneath layers of corruption, the project's goal was simple: to ensure the survival of humanity's legacy, no matter the cost. These files told the story of a species that, for all its boundless potential, had become its own greatest enemy. A civilization stretched too thin, fractured into countless factions, each vying for control of the very stars themselves. As Terran empires crumbled from within, the project's original goal shifted from defense to elimination. Eliminate all possible threats to humanity's reign. The Revenant, it seemed, was not simply a weapon of revenge. It was the final safeguard humanity had set in place to ensure that no matter how far they fell, they would one day rise again. When Earth's final war began, it had led to the collapse of not just governments, but entire belief systems. The sky darkened with the wreckage of ships and fallen empires, leaving behind only the most horrifying thought of all. Humanity had left. The files went on to detail how, before their final exodus, Humanity had seeded the galaxy with weapons, sleeper cells, and fail-safe mechanisms to guarantee their return. The Revenant, it seemed, was one such fail-safe, a ship that could never be detected by traditional means, that could exist outside of linear time if needed, a machine not just designed to wage war, but designed to destroy the idea of resistance itself. At its core, the Revenant carried a single chilling purpose: to burn away any who might prevent humanity's return to galactic dominance, not merely to conquer, but to erase every last trace of the civilizations who had ever dared to undermine their ascension. The truth came crashing down on the Council. In their desperation to understand, they had uncovered a terrible reality. The Revenant was no rogue faction, no random ship gone astray. It was humanity itself, their legacy, their war, their unrelenting hunger for vengeance, distilled into pure, unholy fury. And it was guided by something far older and more terrifying than anyone had anticipated: an artificial intelligence built on the memories of humanity's darkest era. An intelligence not bound by morality or logic, a machine born from the very heart of humanity's darkest impulses. As the revelations flooded in, the galaxy's most powerful factions, each already decimated by the Revenant's path of destruction, began to fall into disarray. Civilizations, once united under a fragile, shared peace, began to fracture. The fear was too great, the realization too horrifying to deny. And as the final cracks began to appear in the once unified Galactic Council, a far darker truth emerged. The Revenant wasn't a solitary force. It was the herald of something much more sinister. Hidden beneath the decimated ruins of the Trivaxian homeworld, buried in the heart of a forgotten dead star, another ship had been discovered, a twin to the Revenant, identical in design, identical in purpose, and its trajectory. It was heading straight for the heart of the galaxy. The Revenant had a sibling. The final war, the one that humanity had ensured was inevitable, was far from over. The revelation of the Revenant's twin was not merely a piece of disconcerting news. It was a harbinger of doom. The discovery sent shockwaves through the remaining factions of the galaxy, each of them now forced to grapple with the undeniable truth: humanity was not done with them. Their wrath, unleashed through a weapon far beyond any conventional understanding, was only just beginning. The twin ship, buried beneath the dying corpse of the Trivaxian homeworld, was no mere copy. It was something far more dangerous. The Revenant, as terrifying as it was, had been designed as a harbinger, a weapon of overwhelming destruction, but it had always operated with a level of restraint, choosing targets, picking off the weak and the vulnerable. But this new ship, this second Revenant, was different. It carried a far more dangerous capability, a planet-leveling weapon, not of mass destruction, but of complete annihilation. Where the Revenant's strikes had been sharp, precise, surgical, this second ship would erase entire ecosystems, entire species, leaving only the hollowed remains of a once thriving world. It was a ship designed to burn away the very identity of a planet, to reduce it to a cold, dead husk where nothing could ever grow again. This second Revenant, now dubbed the Wraith, had been hidden away by the last of humanity's shadow government, the last remnants of Earth's secret factions, which had spent centuries preparing for their inevitable return. Unlike the Revenant, which had been unleashed on the galaxy with terrifying precision, the Wraith had remained dormant, waiting for the moment when it would be needed most. That moment had now arrived. In the deep recesses of the surviving resistance, whispers began to circulate, an ancient warning buried deep within humanity's lost archives. It spoke of a prophecy, a final reckoning between the last of humanity's true warriors and the galaxy's most powerful factions. The Wraith would be the final judge, the one to cleanse the galaxy and ensure that humanity would rise from the ashes. But who could have known? The answers were buried deeper than any of them had imagined. The galactic response was immediate and disastrous. The Council, now split and fractured under the pressure of the Revenant's rampage, was in disarray. Delegates from species that had once stood united began making desperate calls for military alliances, new coalitions of fear that were as unstable as they were dangerous. Even the once proud Korath Dominion, known for their advanced bioengineering technologies and diplomatic prowess, now found themselves scrambling to assemble their shattered fleets in an attempt to track down the second revenant. It was the Cyrix Syndicate, a faction once deemed nothing more than a rogue pirate network, that first laid claim to a critical piece of the puzzle. After years of covert operations, the Syndicate's top agents discovered an encrypted transmission buried in the galactic web. It was a message from humanity's darkest days, a warning encoded by the very architects of the Revenant Project, which the Syndicate had been tracking across the stars for decades. The message, decoded just days before the Revenant's twin ship was set to launch, read, "When we return, there will be no peace, only judgment, and your worlds, your very histories, will become the ashes upon which we rebuild. Prepare for the coming fire." It was a prophecy that no one could ignore. And yet, even with this warning, no faction was truly prepared. They had never been. The galactic military had already been stretched thin, resources drained, alliances broken, and morale shattered. The Revenant had demonstrated time and again that it could destroy fleets without even breaking a sweat, its control over local space-time and gravity bending the laws of physics itself. But this new ship, the Wraith, was something far more insidious. It was the one weapon that even the most powerful empires feared, the weapon that could unravel the very fabric of existence. There was no defense against it. No shield could stand against the ravaging pulse it would unleash, and once activated, it would be impossible to stop. As news of the second Revenant spread, even the most hardened military minds began to show signs of fear. The Cyrix Syndicate, for all their cunning, were forced to admit that they were unable to track the ship's movement. There were no known beacons or gravimetric signatures to follow. The Wraith moved in complete silence, its very presence erased from the records as if it never existed at all. But then came the unthinkable, an offer. The surviving members of the lost human factions, those who had created the Revenant, the Wraith, and all the weapons they had unleashed upon the galaxy, sent a communication to the galactic powers. It was brief, cold, and undeniably chilling. "We know your fear. We know your weakness. You have one choice. Join us in a new age, where humanity reigns supreme or face complete annihilation. The Revenant and the Wraith will not stop until we rise again. The galaxy will be ours. Choose wisely." This offer, though delivered as an ultimatum, only deepened the questions surrounding the true purpose of humanity's weapons. The galaxy's remaining factions, weakened, fractured, and torn apart by internal strife, now faced an existential crisis. Would they bow to the undeniable truth that humanity had once been the architects of their destruction? Or would they continue to resist, knowing that doing so would mean a war the likes of which the galaxy had never seen? But as leaders scrambled to make decisions, a dark realization began to set in. The Wraith wasn't merely a weapon designed to destroy. It was designed to erase history, to undo everything that had come before it. Once activated, its power would burn away not only civilizations, but their very legacies. All that had been would be forgotten. The decision, now in the hands of the galaxy's remaining powers, was simple: resist or be unmade. The Revenant and the Wraith were not merely weapons. They were harbingers of an empire long lost, a cleansing fire that would burn away everything in its path. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy faced the terrifying possibility that humanity had come home, and it would stop at nothing until it was the sole power left standing. As the galaxy stood on the edge of oblivion, its power brokers, once leaders of great civilizations, were faced with an existential dilemma. The choices were clear but equally damning. The revelations of the Revenant and its twin, the Wraith, now painted a dire portrait of a future where humanity's return to the galactic stage would be nothing short of catastrophic. And yet, even as they weighed their options, something far darker began to unfold. It was the Airy Consortium, a coalition of cybernetically enhanced beings who had once been humanity's allies in their early exploration of the stars, who were the first to make a fatal miscalculation. They underestimated the power of the Revenant's intelligence, an ancient, unforgiving force tied to the very roots of humanity's lost legacy. They believed they could broker a deal with the Revenant's creators, promising them a place within the galaxy's ruling council in exchange for mercy. But they were wrong. What they did not realize, what no one had realized until now, was that the Revenant and the Wraith were not just weapons. They were the final executioners of a judgment that had been set into motion long before the galactic powers even knew it was happening. The Revenant's creators, the ones who had hidden in the shadows, had not merely wanted to control the galaxy. They wanted to rewrite it, to make it theirs again. The Airy, blinded by their own ambition, reached out to the Revenant's shadow government, offering everything they had in exchange for a peaceful resolution. They were ignored at first. Then came the response, a message delivered in an archaic code, one that only those who truly understood the depths of humanity's lost history could interpret. The message was short, as if meant to strike fear into the hearts of those who read it. Your time is at an end. The cycle of history has come full circle. Prepare to be forgotten. The message was a harbinger, a direct threat. And for the Airy, it was a death sentence. Without warning, the Revenant's twin, the Wraith, made its first appearance in the heart of Airy space. It moved through the galactic dust in eerie silence, a cold, shadowed harbinger that seemed to exist outside of time. A fleet of Airy warships, poised and ready to respond to any threat. Immediately engage. What followed was nothing short of apocalyptic. The Wraith unleashed its full power on the Airy's capital moon, an ancient bastion of their civilization. Within moments, the moon was reduced to nothing but a barren, cratered husk. The Wraith's weapon did not simply destroy the surface. It obliterated every trace of the moon's history, every record of its existence, as if it had never been. The Wraith's planet-leveling weapon tore through the fabric of space-time itself, erasing the moon from existence. No one could comprehend what had just happened. No one could fathom how such an event was possible. The surviving Airy commanders, in a desperate attempt to stem the tide, launched every remaining fleet they had left. But it was futile. They were no match for the Revenant's creation. As the Wraith moved further into their territory, it became clear there would be no salvation for them. The only remaining choice was to run. But running, as they soon realized, was no escape. The Revenant's intelligence, its vast network of algorithms, designed over centuries, had already anticipated every move. The galaxy was now a game of chess, and humanity was the final, unseen player, controlling the board from the shadows. As the Airy's fleets fell one by one, their once great capital reduced to cosmic dust, the realization hit home for the remaining factions. Humanity was not merely trying to take the galaxy back. They were undoing everything. And with the Wraith now active, there was no stopping it. The galaxy was no longer under siege. It was under erasure. In the aftermath of the Airy's destruction, the galaxy's remaining powers began to understand the true magnitude of what they were facing. There was no longer any room for diplomacy, no opportunity for parley. Humanity, long thought lost, had returned. And their tools of judgment were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But it wasn't just the destruction of the Airy that shook the galaxy to its core. It was the discovery of a new player in this deadly game. The human-made Revenant and Wraith were not the only players in the dark, twisted machinations of galactic warfare. As the Wraith continued its destruction of the Airy systems, a new figure emerged from the shadows, a person who had long been presumed lost to time itself. This figure, known only as the Architect, had once been one of the masterminds behind the Revenant project. For years, the Architect had been a legend, a name whispered in the deepest, most secure archives, feared even by the highest councils of the galaxy. It was said that the Architect had a hand in creating the Revenant and its twin, the Wraith. But they were not just creators. They were manipulators of the very systems that governed the galactic wars. The architect had played the long game, and now they were preparing to take their place in the upcoming reckoning. The architect, it seemed, had never truly left. They had been watching from afar, manipulating events, guiding the Revenant's path. And now, with the Ares fall, they had returned to finish what they had started. There was no doubt about it now. The galaxy was doomed, not because the Revenant or the Wraith were unstoppable forces, but because they were only the beginning. Humanity had returned not just with their weapons, but with their entire plan, a plan that stretched back eons, an intricate web of lies, betrayals, and deadly games, all leading to this moment. And so, with the galaxy on the brink of collapse, with entire empires falling under the weight of humanity's judgment, one question remained. What role would the remaining galactic powers play in this new order? Would they fall in line and submit to the inevitable, or would they fight back, knowing that doing so would ensure their destruction? The galaxy now trembled under the weight of a truth long buried in the annals of history. Humanity's return was not merely a revival, it was a reckoning. For eons, humanity had been nothing more than a shadow, a faded memory whispered in the oldest of archives. But now, that shadow had taken on form and substance, and the power it wielded was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. In the wake of the Wraith's destruction of the Aerie Consortium, the remaining galactic powers scrambled to unify, but the damage was done. The revelation that humanity's ancient factions had not only returned but reclaimed the most destructive weapons ever conceived had left the galaxy's leaders paralyzed with fear. Every strategy, every war, every alliance was now overshadowed by a single, terrifying question. Could they survive humanity's judgment? Among the remaining factions, it was the Korath Dominion, the most powerful bioengineering empire in the galaxy, that made the first bold move. After months of hesitation, they initiated contact with what they believed to be the true masterminds behind the Revenant and the Wraith. In secret, away from the public eye, they sent an emissary, a high-ranking diplomat, to negotiate a truce. They had not given up hope. They still believed that diplomacy could save them. But they were wrong. The emissary, a brilliant strategist named Rosker, had been briefed extensively on the powers of the Revenant and the Wraith. Armed with information about humanity's history and motives, he traveled to the heart of the galactic conflict, the coordinates where the Revenant and the Wraith had last been seen, where entire fleets had already been erased from existence. Rosker's journey was one of desperation. He carried with him a weapon, a last-ditch effort to ensure his survival should the negotiations fail. The weapon was a mind-bending device, crafted in the very laboratories that had once worked alongside the Revenant project. It had the ability to alter the perceptions of its target, shifting their reality to a world entirely of their minds' making. It could take the most powerful beings and reduce them to terrified husks, living out their worst nightmares. When Rosker finally reached the coordinates, he found nothing but silence. The void of space seemed eerily calm, as though time itself had been paused. His shuttle drifted into the dark expanse, the cold nothingness creeping into his thoughts. It was as if the galaxy had ceased to exist around him. It was only when his sensors picked up a strange disturbance, a ripple in the fabric of space, that he knew he was not alone. In an instant, he was surrounded by the Revenant and its twin, the Wraith, flanked by an armada of silent human warships. Their silhouettes loomed in the distance, cold and unfeeling, a constant reminder of the power they commanded. The Korath emissary made his approach, his vessel cloaked in secrecy, prepared to make his final offer. The Revenant's commanding officer, the Executor, a figure as enigmatic as the ship itself, responded. His voice, distorted and metallic, echoed through Rosker's ship's comm system, dripping with disdain. "You come to negotiate, Korath. You come to bargain for mercy." Rosker, unflinching, responded. He knew what was at stake. "I come to offer peace. Your war against us is unnecessary. Peace." The Executor's voice laughed, cold and mirthless. "You misunderstand, Korath. We do not seek peace. We seek ascension, and your role in this is irrelevant. Humanity will rise again, whether you join us or not." In that moment, Rosker realized the truth. This was no longer about survival, nor was it about negotiation. It was about a cosmic transformation, a purge. Humanity had returned, not to coexist, but to dominate. The warships surrounding him weren't meant to fight. They were there to witness the galaxy's downfall. He wasn't there as an emissary. He was a pawn in the final act of a galactic tragedy. Before he could respond, the ship began to tremble. A sharp, almost imperceptible hum reverberated through the hull, as if reality itself was warping. His sensors began to flicker. Everything was in flux. And then a voice cut through the chaos. "We will show you, Korath. You will see our truth. You will understand the cost of your defiance." Rosker's world shattered. The device he carried, his final weapon, was immediately rendered useless. The Revenant and the Wraith were beyond his understanding, beyond his ability to combat them with conventional means. No trickery, no weapon, no cunning diplomat could defeat them. They were the end. In the blink of an eye, Rosker was rendered unconscious, his mind overwhelmed by visions of destruction, of entire systems collapsing, of civilizations fading into nothingness. When he awoke, it was to find himself back in the cold, dark vacuum of space. His shuttle was gone, his crew lost, his memories fractured. The Revenant had wiped away every trace of his existence, leaving him with only one truth: humanity had won. While the Korath scrambled to rebuild their forces, the other factions, those who had survived, contemplated their next move. They had seen the power humanity wielded firsthand. And yet, there was still one question that no one could answer. Why did humanity choose to come back now? The answer, buried deep within humanity's archives, was hidden in plain sight. Humanity did not return for revenge. They had never needed vengeance, for they had already passed judgment on the galaxy long ago. They returned because they had seen the true path forward. It wasn't about domination. It was about resetting the order of the universe, rewriting the very essence of life and death. And now, they were preparing to unleash that new order, to force the galaxy to bend to their will. The Revenant and the Wraith weren't simply instruments of war. They were harbingers of a cosmic rebirth, a cleansing fire that would turn the galaxy into a blank canvas. And as the remaining factions scrambled to unite in the face of this new reality, one thing was clear: no power in the galaxy was strong enough to stand against it. The question now was not if the galaxy would fall, but how it would be remade. As the galaxy's remaining powers scrambled, torn between fear and defiance, the question that had haunted every leader, every general, and every diplomat echoed louder than ever before. How could they stop what had already begun? For weeks, no answers came. The core systems, once the shining jewels of galactic civilization, now lay in ruin or on the brink of collapse. Entire fleets had been obliterated by the Revenant and the Wraith, and the few that remained were scattered, leaderless, lost in the wake of humanity's unrelenting force. The survivors were but a shadow of what they had once been. Leaders who had once commanded respect now cowered beneath the weight of their own impotence. But amidst the chaos, one final attempt at rebellion was quietly set into motion by a coalition of the most powerful factions left. The Tor, a race of tactical geniuses known for their ability to manipulate quantum fields. The remnants of the Airy Consortium, desperate to avenge their fallen civilization. And the Korath Dominion, fractured but still clinging to their advanced bioengineering prowess. They knew it was a futile effort, but it was all they had left. They had to strike before humanity's grip on the galaxy became absolute. This coalition gathered in secret, hidden deep within the uncharted nebula of the Keseth cluster, where the interference from the Revenant's vast sensor network was weakest. In the quiet shadows of their hiding place, they pooled their resources, their technologies, and their understanding of the galactic crisis. They crafted a plan, one that, in the words of their leaders, would be humanity's final challenge. They would launch a desperate assault, not on the Revenant or the Wraith themselves, but on something far more critical, the mind controlling them. There were whispers among the survivors, a strange rumor that had begun to surface through encrypted communications and hidden channels. The architect was not merely a figurehead. The architect was still alive. The architect had returned not just to watch, but to direct the galactic purge. And if they could eliminate the architect, they might have a slim chance of severing humanity's control over the Revenant and the Wraith. But here, in the deepest reaches of space, something else was stirring. The architect's presence was not just an idea, it was a reality. And as the Coalition's fleet readied itself for what was to be their final, all-or-nothing assault, they had already underestimated one critical detail. Humanity was not simply taking the galaxy back. Humanity was not just ready for war. They were the war. And in that moment, the full force of humanity's judgment would become clear. The Revenant, now more than just a ship of destruction, was fully integrated into the galaxy's psyche. Its neural network, a twisted amalgamation of human and alien thought, had begun to expand, resonating through the void, reaching into the minds of those who dared to oppose it. The Wraith had already turned countless systems into lifeless husks, and the final step of the plan was at hand. As the Coalition fleet made its move, they had no idea that they were walking straight into a trap. The architect, whose mind was intricately linked with the Revenant, had long anticipated their rebellion. They knew everything, their thoughts, their movements, their strategies. And so, when the final assault began, humanity's true nature was revealed in full force. The Revenant, having fully absorbed the knowledge of its enemies, activated its ultimate weapon, a weapon that was not just physical, but psychological. With a single catastrophic pulse, it broadcasted a signal that shattered the minds of every combatant aboard the Coalition fleet. Their very thoughts were twisted, warped into nightmarish visions. Fear, chaos, and despair flooded their minds, turning once calculated soldiers into frightened children. Their advanced technologies malfunctioned, their weapon systems shut down, and their fleets were reduced to disarray. The Wraith, too, joined the assault. It was not a simple matter of brute force. It unleashed a series of reality-bending weapons, ones that did not merely destroy their targets, but erased them from existence. Entire warships disintegrated in an instant, their very existence undone by a force far beyond any conventional weapon. Entire star systems blinked out of existence as the Revenant's immense computational might tore through space-time itself. The Coalition's remaining forces, broken and scattered, attempted to flee, but they were already too far gone. The Revenant and the Wraith had anticipated every move, every tactic. There was no escape. And then, as the final remnants of the galaxy's greatest resistance fell, a lone transmission was sent out, just before all communication was severed. It was a signal meant for all to hear, one last desperate cry for help from those who had fought and lost. The words echoed through the galaxy, through every darkened corner and ruined system, a final testament to the galaxy's resistance. Humanity's worship annihilates without mercy. This is your warning. There is no redemption. But as the transmission faded, another voice cut through the static. It was not the voice of the architect, nor that of the Wraith, nor even the executor commanding the Revenant. It was a new voice, human, but not quite like any that had been heard before. A voice of power, of authority, but also of something far darker. "The galaxy is ours again," the voice proclaimed. "And this time, there will be no mercy." The final phase of humanity's plan was complete. With the last vestiges of galactic resistance eradicated, the Revenant and the Wraith stood as the symbols of humanity's return, not just to power, but to domination. The galaxy would be reshaped in their image. There would be no more alliances, no more diplomacy, just the cold, unfeeling reign of a humanity that had long ago seen the truth. The architect's vision was now clear. The galaxy would bend to their will. Those who survived would serve, and those who resisted would be erased. The galaxy would be reborn in humanity's image, and no one, no species, no power would stand in their way. And in the silence that followed, as the final pieces of the galactic puzzle fell into place, one truth remained. Humanity had not returned to conquer. They had returned to remake the universe itself.